There were nights I'd wake up with my fists clenched so tight my nails cut into my palms. Not from nightmares, but from dreaming, I finally told that man exactly what he deserved to hear. My name is Ruthie Mae Holloway, and I'm 78 years old now. I'm sitting here on my old wooden porch in Russell, Kansas, watching the prairie grass sway in the evening breeze, just like I've done nearly every evening for the past 20 years. The golden wheat fields stretch out as far as the eye can see, catching the last rays of sunlight. This view has been my comfort through some of the hardest and sweetest moments of my life. If you're watching this video, I'd sure love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below letting this old lady know which part of the country or world you're in. It makes me feel like we're having a proper visit, like neighbors sharing stories across a fence. And if my story touches you in any way, hitting that like button would warm this old heart of mine. Now, where was I? I was just 27 years old when I got that promotion at Heartland Textiles back in 1974. I'd been working at that sprawling factory on the outskirts of Wichita since I was 19, starting as nothing more than another girl at a sewing machine. Back then, women like me in Kansas had mighty few options. We were farmers' daughters, future wives, or if we were particularly lucky, maybe school teachers or secretaries. I wasn't like most girls, though. After my fiancé Jimmy died in Vietnam in '67, something changed inside me. I decided I wouldn't just sit around waiting for another husband or live in my parents' shadow forever. I wanted more than what these plains seemed to offer a woman. I can still remember Daddy's face when I told him I was leaving for the city. He didn't speak to me for nearly a month. "No decent woman leaves her family for a factory job," he said, his voice cutting deeper than any blade could. Mama cried quietly while packing my small suitcase. The morning I left, I found a carefully wrapped ham sandwich and $7 hidden in my coat pocket. Everything she could spare without Daddy knowing. Wichita might as well have been New York City to me then. Those first months were near unbearable. I shared a tiny room with 2 other factory girls at Mrs. Finch's boarding house, where the rules were strict as Sunday school. Doors locked at 8:30 p.m. sharp, no male visitors ever, and church attendance required every Sunday. The smell of machine oil and fabric dust followed me everywhere, clinging to my hair and skin no matter how hard I scrubbed in our shared bathroom. My hands, once smooth from nothing harder than household chores, soon became rough and frequently pricked by needles and pins. I still have the scars on my fingertips to prove it. But unlike many of the girls who saw factory work as just a stepping stone to marriage, I took real pride in what I did. I stayed late watching the floor managers check quality. I asked questions about fabric types, order processing, shipping schedules, anything I could learn. Mr. Jenkins, the oldest floor manager, started to notice my interest. "Holloway," he'd call me by my last name like he did with the men. "You've got a better eye for flaws than half the boys we got supervising." Coming from him, that was high praise indeed. It was Jenkins who suggested I apply for the assistant supervisor position when old Harold Meyer retired in '72. Lord, the laughter in the break room when word got around that I'd put my name in for consideration. Susan Parker, who'd worked beside me for years, pulled me aside during lunch. "Ruthie, have you lost your mind completely? No woman's ever going to get men to respect her enough to lead in this place. You're setting yourself up for heartbreak." Maybe she was right, but I couldn't back down. For 2 years, I worked as an assistant under Mr. Donovan, a fair man, who, despite his initial doubts, came to value my work. When he transferred to the Springfield plant in '74, to everyone's shock, mine included, I was named supervisor of the entire sewing department. This wasn't my decision, Mr. Hargrove, the factory director, made perfectly clear when he called me to his office. Corporate in Chicago is pushing this equal opportunity nonsense to look progressive in the papers. The government's breathing down everyone's neck these days with that new Equal Employment Opportunity Act. But let me make myself crystal clear, Miss Holloway. One misstep, one failure to meet quota, and we'll have to reconsider the arrangement. I walked out of that office torn between terror and triumph. I would be the first woman supervisor in Heartland's entire 30-year history. My salary would nearly double. I could finally help Mama and Daddy, who were struggling with the farm after 3 years of drought. I could rent my own apartment, small as it might be. That night, Sitting on my narrow bed at the boarding house, I wrote to Mama with the news. I didn't mention Mr. Hargrove's warning or how my hands trembled as I wrote. I just told her I'd made something of myself, that her silent sacrifice that morning I left had not been in vain. What I didn't know then, couldn't possibly have known, was that my real battle hadn't even begun. The next morning, I met my new direct superior for the first time, Vernon Rollins, the production manager who'd transferred from the Detroit plant. The moment his cold blue eyes assessed me from head to toe, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the factory's poor heating. "So you're the girl they're trying to pass off as management," he said, not bothering to shake my extended hand. "Let's see how long this little experiment lasts." In that moment, staring into those dismissive eyes, I should have known what was coming, but I was too full of pride and determination to recognize the warning signs. I squared my shoulders, met his gaze directly, and said, "I expect it'll last as long as the quality of my work dictates, Mr. Rollins." His smile never reached his eyes. "We'll see about that, Miss Holloway. We'll certainly see." And that was just the beginning. Little did I know that over the next 4 years, that man would try everything in his power to break not just my career, but my very spirit. He almost succeeded too, if it hadn't been for what I did next. The very next day after my promotion, I arrived at the factory 30 minutes early, my stomach in knots, but my head held high. I wanted to review the production schedules before everyone arrived, to make sure I knew exactly what was expected of my department. The factory floor was eerily quiet that early, just the distant hum of the heating system and the smell of oil and fabric that had become as familiar to me as my own reflection. I was studying the clipboard at my new desk when I heard his footsteps. Something about the deliberate way Vernon Rollins walked told you he was a man who thought the ground beneath him was privileged to bear his weight. "Surprised to see you survived the night," he said, leaning against the doorframe of the small glass-walled office that was now mine. "Most women would have thought better of it by morning." "I'm not most women, Mr. Rollins," I replied, not looking up from my paperwork. "These production targets seem achievable, but I'd like to discuss the issue with the threading machines on line 3. "I didn't ask for your opinions on equipment, Holloway." He stepped into my space, towering over my desk. "Your job is to keep those girls stitching on time. The machines are my concern." That was the first of countless dismissals. Over the next weeks, it became clear that Vernon Rollins had made it his personal mission to ensure I failed. It started small. Production schedules would mysteriously change without my notification. Important memos meant for my department would never reach me. When I'd attend management meetings, my chair would somehow disappear, forcing me to either stand awkwardly or drag one in from another room while everyone watched. "Sorry about that, Holloway," Rollins would say with mock concern. "Must have been the janitor. Probably didn't realize anyone would be sitting there." The men would chuckle, none of them meeting my eyes. They weren't bad men, most of them, just cowards afraid of being associated with the factory's experiment. By the end of the first month, the sabotage grew bolder. I arrived one Monday to find my entire department had been told their shift started an hour later than scheduled, except no one had informed me of the change. Mr. Hargrove called me into his office that afternoon. "Miss Holloway, we lost approximately $500 in production today due to your scheduling error." His face showed no emotion as he slid a written warning across his desk for me to sign. "But sir, I wasn't notified of any schedule change. Mr. Rollins says he discussed it with you on Friday afternoon. Are you calling him a liar?" I stared at the paper, my hand trembling slightly as I picked up the pen. "No, sir. It won't happen again." That night, I cried into my pillow in my tiny apartment. I'd finally moved out of the boarding house with my increased salary. But I swore they'd be my last tears over Vernon Rollins. I was a farmer's daughter from Kansas. We don't break easily. The pattern continued. Small cruelties designed to make me quit. My paperwork would go missing. Maintenance requests for my department were mysteriously delayed. During quality control checks, Rollins would inspect my team's work with exaggerated scrutiny, finding flaws invisible to anyone else. "This stitching is completely unacceptable," he'd announce loudly on the factory floor while workers from other departments would pause to watch. "Is this the standard you allow, Miss Holloway?" Perhaps homemaking would be more suitable for your talents. The women in my department tried to be supportive in their quiet ways. Martha, who'd been sewing collars for 20 years, would leave an apple or homemade cookie on my desk when things got particularly rough. Doreen, barely 20 but with nimble fingers that could outwork anyone, would stay late without being asked if we were falling behind. "Don't you let that devil drive you out, Miss Ruthie," she whispered one evening as we both worked overtime. "My grandmama always said the devil works hardest against those he fears most." By the 6-month mark, I was exhausted but still standing. What Rollins hadn't counted on was that I was actually good at my job. Despite his interference, my department's numbers were improving. The women responded to my leadership style, firm but fair, respectful of their experience. I'd worked alongside them. I knew what the job demanded in a way the male supervisors never could. But Rollins was nothing if not persistent. In July of '74, during a heat wave that had the whole factory sweating through their clothes, he made his most public attempt to humiliate me yet. The big July 4th order for a department store chain in Dallas was due to ship, and we were all working around the clock to meet the deadline. I'd just finished inspecting the final shipment when Rollins marched onto the floor with Mr. Hargrove and 2 men in expensive suits, representatives from the Dallas chain. "And this is our sewing department," Rollins was saying, all smiles and charm, "where apparently we've had some quality control issues with your order." My heart stopped. I'd personally checked every box. Quality issues? I stepped forward. "Mr. Rollins, I've inspected the entire shipment myself." He gave me a look of exaggerated sympathy. "Yes, that's rather the problem, isn't it? Gentlemen, if you'll examine these samples." From his clipboard, he produced 3 dress shirts with obvious flaws, uneven collars, misaligned buttons, puckered seams, flaws that couldn't possibly have come from my department, not after our rigorous checks. "Miss Holloway," Mr. Hargrove's voice was cold as January ice, "please explain how these passed your inspection." The entire factory floor had gone silent. 50 pairs of eyes watched me, including the knowing smirks of Rollins' male allies and the worried glances of my own team. In that moment, I felt something snap inside me, not my courage, but my restraint. "These shirts," I said slowly, picking one up and examining it, "did not come from my department." Rollins scoffed. "Are you suggesting I fabricated evidence?" "I'm not suggesting anything, Mr. Rollins. I'm stating a fact. These shirts have a purple thread marker on the inside seam. As of 3 weeks ago, my department switched to blue markers by your own directive. These shirts either came from another department or another time. They certainly didn't come from my team's current production." The silence that followed was deafening. I held Rollins' gaze without blinking. Mr. Hargrove cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Vernon, is this true about the thread markers?" I'll never forget the flash of hatred in Rollins' eyes. He'd been caught, and we both knew it. "I may have pulled samples from the reject bin for demonstration purposes," he admitted reluctantly, "to show our guests what we look for in quality control." The representatives from Dallas exchanged glances. One of them, an older gentleman with kind eyes, turned to me. "Young lady, we've been working with Heartland for 15 years. This is the first time our order has been ready ahead of schedule with 0 rejects. Whatever you're doing here, keep it up." I nodded professionally, but inside I was soaring. It was a small victory, but significant. For the first time, someone had witnessed Rollins' tactics. But I wasn't naive enough to think it would stop him. If anything, the public embarrassment would only fuel his determination. I was right. The next morning, I found a dead mouse in my desk drawer. The day after, the women's restroom near my department was suddenly under maintenance, forcing my team to walk clear across the factory for bathroom breaks. The following week, the air conditioning to our section mysteriously failed during the hottest days of summer. With each new challenge, I adapted. I brought a small electric fan from home for each woman on my team. I reorganized break schedules to minimize production loss during bathroom trips. I stayed 2 hours late every evening to double-check my paperwork and make copies that I kept locked in my car. What Rollins never understood was that every obstacle he threw at me only made me more determined to succeed. Every cruel remark, every sabotaged project, every public humiliation was like fuel to a fire that burned ever brighter inside me. But even the strongest fires can be smothered with enough dirt, and Vernon Rollins had an endless supply. By autumn, despite my best efforts, the constant battle was taking its toll. I'd lost weight, developed migraines, and started jumping at sudden noises. My elderly parents noticed the change during my monthly visit to the farm. "You're working too hard, Ruthie Mae," Mama said, pressing a cool cloth to my forehead during a particularly bad headache. "No job is worth your health." "I can't quit, Mama. I just can't." "Ain't about quitting," Daddy surprised me by saying. He'd gradually come to accept my career choice over the years. "It's about fighting smart instead of just fighting hard." His words stayed with me on the drive back to Wichita. Fighting smart. What did that mean in this situation? I couldn't outrank Rollins. I couldn't change his mind about women in management. I couldn't even avoid him. The answer came to me that night as I lay awake staring at my ceiling. If I couldn't change Rollins or escape him, I had to find a way to protect myself from him. And the only protection in this world against powerful men was evidence. The very next morning, I purchased a small notebook with my lunch money. It was nothing special, just a basic spiral-bound pad that could fit in my purse. But it would become the most important weapon in my arsenal against Vernon Rollins and the beginning of a revolution none of us could have anticipated. "Documentation," I whispered to myself as I wrote the date on the first page. "Let's see how smart you really are, Mr. Rollins." That small spiral notebook became my constant companion. I kept it hidden in my purse during the day and wrote in it religiously each evening, documenting every slight, every sabotage, every misunderstanding orchestrated by Vernon Rollins. I was meticulous, noting dates, times, witnesses, and exact words spoken. I even saved memos with conflicting instructions, tucking them between the pages like pressed flowers of evidence. October 3rd, 1974. Rollins informed shipping that our department's rush order for Macy's would be delayed by 2 days. When confronted, claimed I had requested the extension. Witnesses: Jim from shipping, Carol from billing. October 7th, 1974. Found production quotas for my department increased by 15% with no additional staff. Other departments unchanged. Hargrove claims Rollins told him I had boasted we could handle more. No such conversation occurred. October 12, 1974. Third time this month my department's maintenance requests misplaced. Machines the Murger 7 and Thabberger 13 remain non-functional. Dorothy Miller lost half a day's wages due to inability to work. Each entry was a small piece of a larger puzzle. A pattern of behavior so systematic it couldn't be dismissed as coincidence or misunderstanding. But I knew a notebook of complaints wouldn't be enough on its own. I needed allies, witnesses willing to speak up if necessary. Building those alliances required caution. Most of the men in management had already aligned themselves with Rollins, either out of genuine agreement with his views on women in leadership or simple self-preservation. The women on the factory floor were sympathetic, but vulnerable. Most couldn't risk their jobs to defend me. Many had children to feed or were the sole breadwinners in their households. I started small, with Gladys in accounting. She was a stern woman in her 50s who'd been with the company since the war years and took no nonsense from anyone, including Rollins. "He's been altering your department's timesheets," she whispered to me one day in the ladies' room, the one place in the factory where we could speak without male ears listening. "Makes it look like your girls are taking longer breaks than scheduled. Can you prove it?" I asked. She hesitated. "I keep my own records, not strictly by the book, mind you, but accurate. Could I see them, just to compare with mine?" Another hesitation, longer this time. Then, "Meet me at Woolworth's lunch counter tomorrow, noon sharp." Gladys wasn't the only one who'd noticed Rollins's campaign against me. Slowly, cautiously, others began to share information. Richard from maintenance admitted Rollins had instructed him to prioritize other departments' repairs over mine. Helen from personnel confirmed my suspicion that applications for open positions in my department were being mysteriously lost before I could interview qualified candidates. Each new piece of information went into my notebook. By Christmas, I'd filled the first one and started a second. I hid them at home, tucked inside an old flour canister where no one would think to look. The holidays brought a brief respite. Rollins took 2 weeks off to visit family in Michigan. The factory ran smoother in his absence than it had all year. My department exceeded production quotas 3 days in a row, and Mr. Hargrove actually nodded approvingly at me in the hallway. It was the closest thing to praise I'd received from him since my promotion. But January brought Rollins back, refreshed and more determined than ever. The new year of 1975 dawned with his most direct attack yet. "Your performance review, Miss Holloway." He dropped the folder on my desk with a smirk. "I took the liberty of completing it myself, given our unique reporting structure." I opened the folder and felt my stomach drop. On a scale of 1 to 5, he'd rated me a 1 in nearly every category: leadership, decision-making, problem-solving, communication, team building. All 1s, except punctuality, which received a grudging 3. "This is completely inaccurate," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "My department has met or exceeded quotas consistently for the past quarter. Our reject rate is the lowest in the factory." "Numbers can be manipulated," he replied smoothly. "This evaluation reflects my professional assessment of your suitability for management. Mr. Hargrove has already signed off on it." The implications were clear. With this review on my record, I could be demoted or fired at any time. Any future employer would see these ratings and assume I was incompetent. It was Rollins's checkmate move, or so he thought. That night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by my notebooks and the various documents I'd collected. I'd been defensive for too long, constantly reacting to Rollins's attacks rather than taking control of the situation. Daddy's words echoed in my mind. Fight smart, not just hard. It was time to change tactics. The next day, I requested a meeting with Mr. Hargrove. "Regarding what, Miss Holloway?" his secretary asked with a raised eyebrow. "Regarding a pattern of workplace harassment affecting production efficiency," I replied formally. She looked startled by my professional tone, but wrote it down. "He can see you Thursday at 2 p.m. For the next 2 days, I prepared meticulously. I created a report summarizing the most egregious incidents, backed by documentation and witness accounts. I compiled production statistics showing how my department performed when Rollins interfered versus when he didn't. I practiced what I would say in front of my bathroom mirror until the words flowed without emotion clouding them. When Thursday arrived, I dressed in my best navy suit, the one I'd splurged on when I got the promotion. I pulled my hair back in a neat bun and wore my grandmother's simple pearl earrings for courage. I looked every inch the professional as I knocked on Mr. Hargrove's door at precisely 2 p.m. "Come in, Miss Holloway." I wasn't prepared to see Vernon Rollins sitting across from Hargrove's desk, his face a mask of smug confidence. "I took the liberty of inviting Mr. Rollins, given that your concerns apparently involve his department," Hargrove said, not quite meeting my eyes. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm me. This wasn't how I'd planned the meeting, but I'd come too far to back down now. I took a deep breath and took the empty seat, placing my folder on my lap. "Actually, Mr. Hargrove, that makes this simpler. My concerns do indeed involve Mr. Rollins, but not his department. They involve his systematic campaign to undermine my authority and sabotage my department's work." Rollins laughed. "Really, Robert? I told you this would happen. When women can't handle responsibility, they always look for a man to blame." I didn't flinch. Instead, I opened my folder and removed a stack of papers, placing them methodically on Hargrove's desk. These are copies of altered production schedules, showing how original targets for my department were changed without notification. Another stack joined the first. These are maintenance requests submitted repeatedly for the same machines with no action taken. Hargrove frowned, picking up the papers while Rollins shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "This," I continued, placing a third stack down, "is a comparison of staff allocation across departments, showing how my department has been consistently understaffed despite increasing production targets." I kept going, presenting one piece of evidence after another, my voice growing more confident with each document. When I finally placed my performance review on top of the pile, I was no longer nervous. "And this evaluation, which Mr. Rollins claims you approved, contains ratings that contradict the actual production data from my department. Data verified by accounting and quality control. The room was silent, except for the ticking of the wall clock. Hargrove looked stunned as he examined the documents. Rollins' face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is absurd," he finally sputtered. "She's obviously fabricated these records." "These are company documents, Mr. Rollins," I interrupted calmly. "Each one with proper signatures and timestamps. Nothing is fabricated." Hargrove cleared his throat. "Miss Holloway, are you suggesting that Mr. Rollins deliberately—" "I'm not suggesting anything, sir. I'm presenting evidence of what has happened over the past 7 months. The pattern speaks for itself." Rollins slammed his fist on the desk. "This is exactly why women don't belong in management. Emotional, vindictive." "That's enough, Vernon," Hargrove said sharply. He turned to me, his expression guarded. "Miss Holloway, these are serious allegations that will require investigation." "I understand, sir. I should add that several employees are willing to provide statements confirming these incidents." I hesitated, then played my final card. "As are 2 of our major clients who were misled about production delays." That got his attention. Nothing frightened management more than unhappy clients. "I'll need time to review all this," Hargrove said, gesturing to the stacks of evidence. "Of course, sir." I stood, smoothing my skirt. "I should mention that I've kept copies of everything, as well as my original notes. For the record." As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of Rollins' face. The hatred there was unmistakable. But there was something else, too. The first flicker of fear. He'd underestimated me from the beginning, dismissed me as just another woman who'd break under pressure. He never imagined I'd fight back with his own weapons. Documentation, procedure, evidence. I walked back to my department with my head high, ignoring the curious glances from workers who'd seen me enter Hargrove's office. For the first time since my promotion, I felt a sense of control. Whatever happened next, I'd stood up for myself and for every woman who'd ever been undermined, dismissed, or sabotaged simply for daring to lead. What I didn't know then was that my small act of rebellion was about to spark something much bigger than my personal battle with Vernon Rollins. The spiral notebooks hidden in my flour canister would become the blueprint for a transformation none of us could have imagined, reaching far beyond the walls of Heartland Textiles. But that evening, as I carefully documented the meeting in my 3rd notebook, all I felt was a quiet determination. The war wasn't over, but I'd finally fought back. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the exhaustion and anxiety, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, I could win. The 3 days following my meeting with Mr. Hargrove were the quietest I'd experienced since my promotion. Vernon Rollins wasn't on the factory floor, and rumors flew like loose threads in a windstorm. Some said he was sick. Others whispered he'd been called to Chicago to meet with corporate. The women in my department kept their heads down and worked diligently, but I caught their questioning glances. "Just focus on the Johnson & Johnson order," I instructed, keeping my voice steady. "Everything else will sort itself out." On the 4th day, Mr. Hargrove's secretary appeared at my office door. "He wants to see you." Now, my heart hammered against my ribs as I walked to his office, but I kept my pace unhurried, my expression calm. When I entered, Hargrove was alone, his desk cleared except for a single folder, my folder of evidence. "Sit down, Miss Holloway." I did, folding my hands in my lap to keep them from trembling. "I've reviewed your documentation," he began, tapping the folder, "and I've spoken with several employees, including Gladys from accounting and Richard from maintenance." I remained silent, waiting. "I've also spoken with the representatives from Dillard's who visited last summer. They confirmed your version of events regarding the shirt quality issue." He removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "It appears there has been a situation developing that I was not fully aware of." Still, I waited. "Mr. Rollins has been transferred, effective immediately. The Detroit plant needed a floor manager, and he's been reassigned." Relief flooded through me, but I kept my expression neutral. "I see. I want to be clear, Miss Holloway. The company is not admitting to any impropriety in Mr. Rollins' management style. This is simply a personnel adjustment to improve efficiency. Of course, heaven forbid Heartland Textiles admit that one of their male managers had systematically abused his power to torment a female supervisor. I understand, sir. Hargrove looked uncomfortable. Your performance review has been revised. I've evaluated your work personally based on production data. You'll find it satisfactory. Thank you, sir. He cleared his throat. There's one more thing. Corporate has been impressed with your department's numbers, despite the challenges. They've approved a new position, assistant production manager, factory-wide responsibilities, reporting directly to me. The position comes with a significant salary increase and an office upstairs. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. Are you offering me a promotion, Mr. Hargrove? Consider it recognition of your persistence and your attention to documentation. A thin smile crossed his face. Skills the company apparently values. 2 promotions in less than a year. From the sewing line to management. It was unheard of, especially for a woman. I'd be honored to accept, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the emotions swirling inside me. Good. You'll start next Monday. I suggest you begin training your replacement immediately. Perhaps that young woman, Doreen, is it? Who's been handling the line when you're absent. Another woman in management. The idea would have been unthinkable a year ago. She'd be excellent, I agreed. As I stood to leave, Hargrove held up a hand. Miss Holloway, Ruthie, a word of advice. This promotion will put you in charge of men who've never reported to a woman before. Some won't take kindly to it. I'm aware of that, sir. Yes, well, he hesitated. Keep those notebooks of yours handy. Something tells me you might need them again. I almost smiled. I already bought a fresh one, sir. Walking back to my department that day, everything looked different. The same machines hummed, the same fabric dust floated in the air, but I saw it all through new eyes. I'd fought a battle I never wanted and somehow emerged victorious. That evening, I called my parents from my apartment. Daddy, I said when he answered, I took your advice about fighting smart. And it worked. His chuckle warmed me from 3 hours away. Never doubted it would, Ruthie May. Your mama and I didn't raise no fool. The transition to assistant production manager wasn't smooth by any means. The first management meeting I attended in my new role, someone had placed a child's doll in my chair, a not-so-subtle message about what they thought of a woman in power. I simply picked it up, tucked it in my desk drawer, and carried on with the meeting as if nothing had happened. The sabotage was subtler than Rollins had been. Important information conveniently forgotten when I needed it, male supervisors meeting without me, the occasional inappropriate comment disguised as a joke. But I had learned my lessons well. Each incident went into my notebook. Each challenge was met with composed competence rather than emotional reaction, and I wasn't alone anymore. Doreen thrived as the new department supervisor, bringing fresh ideas that improved efficiency even further. When she encountered resistance, I was there to back her up. When the men tried to exclude her from decisions, I made sure her voice was heard. Gradually, something remarkable began to happen. Other women in the factory started to speak up more. They applied for positions they would have previously thought unattainable. They challenged unfair practices. They began keeping their own notebooks. In March of 1976, Emma Rodriguez from Cutting became the 3rd female supervisor at Heartland. By the end of that year, women held 5 of the 12 supervisory positions in the factory, not because of some corporate mandate or government regulation, but because they were genuinely good at their jobs and finally had the courage to prove it. My proudest moment came in early 1977, when Mr. Hargrove announced his retirement. The factory gathered in the canteen for his farewell speech. I've given 40 years to this company, he said, looking oddly vulnerable without his usual desk to hide behind. Seen it through war shortages and peacetime expansion. But the changes of these past 2 years have been among the most significant of my career. He glanced at me, then at the other women who now sat among the management team. Some changes I resisted, I admit it. But the numbers don't lie. Productivity up 17%. Reject rates down 12%. Worker retention improved by nearly 1/3. He cleared his throat. Sometimes an old dog can learn new tricks after all. 2 weeks later, the new factory director arrived from Chicago. A woman named Catherine Michaels, with 20 years of industry experience and a no-nonsense attitude that immediately earned my respect. I've heard about you, Miss Holloway, she said during our first meeting. They tell me you keep meticulous records. I smiled. I found it useful, as have I. She opened her briefcase and removed a worn leather journal. Documentation is a woman's best weapon in this business. That, and finding allies where you can. Is that how you made it to director? I asked. That, and being twice as good as every man who wanted my job. She studied me with shrewd eyes. The company has plans for this facility, Miss Holloway. Progressive plans. Are you interested in being part of them? Absolutely. Over the next 5 years, Heartland Textiles became a model for other factories in the region. Under Catherine's leadership, and with my devoted attention to operations, we implemented changes that would have been unthinkable when I started. Equal pay scales regardless of gender, clear paths to advancement based on performance rather than seniority, even a small daycare facility for employees' children. By 1982, when Catherine was promoted to the corporate office in Chicago, women made up nearly 40% of our management team. And I, Ruthie Mae Holloway, daughter of a Kansas wheat farmer who once believed no decent woman would work in a factory, became the new factory director. The spiral notebooks came with me to my new office, all 12 of them by then, a chronicle of battles fought and won, a testament to persistence and courage. I kept them in a box beneath my desk, as a reminder of where I'd started and how far I'd come. They served another purpose too. Whenever a young woman would come to me, frustrated by the barriers still in her way, because progress wasn't perfect and old prejudices died hard, I would show her those notebooks. Documentation, I'd tell her. Record everything, build your case, and know you're not fighting alone. Some of those women went on to become supervisors, managers, even executives. Others took their lessons to different companies, different industries. Each one carried forward the simple strategy that had worked for me: meticulous records, quiet persistence, and the courage to speak truth to power when the moment demanded it. I retired from Heartland in 1995 after 28 years of service. At my retirement party, Catherine Michaels, by then a senior vice president, presented me with a beautiful leather-bound journal. For your next chapter, she said with a smile. Though I doubt it will be as dramatic as the first. She was right about that. My life since retirement has been peaceful. This little house in Russell, close enough to visit my sister's grandchildren, but far enough from Wichita to feel like I've truly left work behind. I spend my days gardening, reading, occasionally consulting for businesses interested in gender equality in the workplace. The wheat fields still stretch out beyond my porch, golden in the summer sun, but they no longer feel like a prison. They're simply home. Vernon Rollins, I heard he took early retirement sometime in the 1980s. Whatever damage he hoped to inflict on my career ultimately only made it stronger. In a strange way, I owe him a debt. Without his cruelty, I might never have found the fighter within me. Sometimes I wonder how many other women faced men like him and weren't as fortunate. Women who didn't keep notebooks, who didn't find allies, who eventually broke under the constant pressure. Women whose talents and leadership were lost to us all because someone decided they didn't belong. That's why I'm sharing my story now, at 78 years old. Because even today, there are Vernon Rollinses in corner offices and boardrooms, on factory floors, and in government halls. And there are women facing them who need to know they're not alone. If you're one of those women watching this, know that your struggle matters, your persistence matters, your leadership matters. Keep your own version of my notebooks, whether it's digital evidence or handwritten records. Build your case, find your allies, and never, never let anyone convince you that you don't belong. Oh, and if my story has meant something to you today, I'd be mighty grateful if you'd hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. My granddaughter Jenny, who set all this up, tells me it helps more folks find these stories. And there are more stories to tell, not just mine, but those of countless women who fought quiet revolutions in offices and factories across America. The sun's starting to set now over these Kansas wheat fields. The same sun that's been rising and setting on these plains since long before any of us were here and will continue long after we're gone. But while we're here, we can make a difference. We can change things, one notebook at a time.